In my previous job at Kadmon, which was an 11-year or so journey for me, I joined the organization where it was an organization that had acquired a business. Integration had been a little bit of a challenge because there was very much a cultural difference between the two organizations, both from a execution perspective, but also from a pragmatic perspective, with one being in Pennsylvania and one aspect of the business being in New York. The business had a number of different leadership changes over time, and importantly, evolved its business model and evolved its vision as those leaders began to change. What I noticed was that over time, as the culture shifted from being one where people were competing with each other to one where people were focused on the end goal and establishing alignment from each of the key stakeholders, from the investor base through to the board, through to the senior leadership, through to the employees, and ultimately through to the potential patients we look to serve. At that point, the science began to work, and that was a huge contributor to its success. We had a number of different people that were there for a long period of time, but we also saw some turnover. And it was important to see that turnover take place because we needed to implement cultural change. Those that stuck around were bought in, were all in to the new culture that we were looking to establish. And what was cool was that the innovation that led to a drug being approved came out of a lab that was one lab that had been there from the very beginning. That lab understood the vision. That lab understood the ability to think critically and think about things differently. And the new leadership team, or the evolution of the leadership team, created an environment that allowed that to be successful. As I think about culture historically, I've always thought about different teams and what they all had in common. And I think about teams like the New Zealand All Blacks or the US Women's National Soccer Team, the team that was built at Google in the early days, and the team that was built at other major organizations. And what's consistent amongst them is this idea that you need to have what is essentially a no dickheads policy. You need to make sure that you have people who are aligned. It's not to say you can't be strict with each other. It's not to say you can't be hard on each other, but it's knowing that people have the same end goal as you, that you're willing to accept that level of urgency, that level of intensity, and ultimately making sure that if your feet were pushed to the fire, that you could rely on those people. And sometimes in biotech, you only learn that about people through the hard times. And certainly at Kadmon, that was an experience we had. And in the early days of Evommune, you learn who you can trust, who you can rely upon, and you emerge from those experiences greater. And I think that those things are consistent across a number of those sports teams, a number of those organizations, from NASA crews and hopefully into Evommune. The beauty of the time point that I came to Evommune was that they'd already established a framework. They had a wonderful founding team and a CEO who had a very clear vision that executed on their seed funding and their Series A funding. And we were already advancing a pipeline of products that had meaningful end goals and key therapeutic areas targeting inflammatory diseases. That said, maintaining and ensuring that the culture is important, even while everything else is going well, is just as critical as maintaining a culture when things aren't going well. So I was able to take some of the learnings from Kadmon and translate them by making sure that we were right-sized in our legal and compliance framework, we were right-sized in our business development activities, and we were right-sized in our corporate strategy, making sure that we had the right types of people in each key critical roles, empowering them to go and deliver on their corporate goals, and then holding each of them and the organization accountable when things didn't go right. At the end of the day, for Evommune, we're only just getting started on our journey. We commit to making sure that nobody will outwork us, but we also recognize that we play in a very competitive, highly regulated industry where doing right is always the right thing, and it's never too late to do the right thing. That's something that our CEO often reminds us of. So we're constantly evaluating, we're constantly reconsidering and analyzing our decisions, and always keeping in the back of our mind the goal. And the goal is to deliver medicines for chronic inflammatory diseases.